Hi, welcome to the August 2023 Austin Software Cooperative meetup. And we're going to be doing a book review today, Companies We Keep, Employee Ownership in the Business of Community and Place by John Abrams. Watson's going to go over the book with a mind map, and we'll have a chance for, if you have any questions or comments going along, just speak up. Hope you enjoy. Watson.
Thanks. All right, Companies We Keep, John Abrams. This book was recommended by the um, Employee Ownership Research Cluster in Dallas. uh, I'll just say a bit about the book, an overview. The the book starts out as almost like a memoir of the business and a history. And then it starts to get in a little bit more into the nitty gritty, which I was pleasantly surprised. Um, we'll just be going over the first two chapters here, and then we'll um, maybe, hopefully, we'll have more discussion. Maybe we can treat this about a little bit more like intro to cooperatives and other employee ownership, so people can ask questions. Notice there's more people here. Um, but so we can move a little bit slower. And then we'll have a follow up with the rest of the book. Maybe we can do it in three um, sessions. Who knows? So let's get into it. So, as far as the introduction, again, like I was saying, the book is more the first chapter and introduction is kind of like almost like a memoir of the beginning, the genesis of this company called the South Mountain Company. So, like here it says they were a design build company founded in 1975, and then it became owned and operated by its employees. And they also wanted to make all of their operations carbon neutral in 10 years. They had a cooperative ownership structure that assigned wealth uh, to everyone who owned the company, and they wanted to have a democratic system of decision making, giving everyone a voice, and this type of stuff that we're used to. But what I'm gonna do is talk about everything here, like as if people don't understand cooperatives or are not, they're just being introduced to it. So cooperatives are a democratic. They have a democratic system of decision making, and that's what they were wanting to implement. And like what he's saying here, the book is a recognition that when the people who are making decisions bear the responsibility for the consequences of those decisions and also share in the rewards that accrue, better decisions will result. It's about building community within the workplace and connections to the communities where we work and live. So I'll stop here a little bit and say being embedded in cooperatives, reading about cooperatives, and I see kind of two sides. I see people uh, putting this idea, it's kind of maybe more of like an idealistic view of what cooperatives would be. And then I see the other side, maybe kind of a critique of cooperatives. And then how, where the rubber meets the road, how the economists view it, and everything like that. I kind of want to get, maybe there's other people on the call. What do you all think about cooperatives and this view that, you know, what they're saying here as far as making it to where, hey, when people decide to come together and say, hey, we're all smart, let's do something together, right? And then they say um, something like this: we're going to bear the responsibility for the consequences of our decisions, and we're also going to share in the rewards. Usually when people get together, they just think of it's all rewards, you know. But this part here, better decisions will result. So oftentimes people think, if we just include everyone in the decision making process, better decisions will result. Like, what do people think about that? Do you think it's idealistic, or do you think it's pragmatic, or something else? I kind of, what do people think about that? Anybody wants to chime in? Just
I mean,
no wrong
intuitively,
answers. Go ahead.
intuitively for me, it seems like if you're thinking about consequences and beyond just rewards, um, if you're including things that you may count as not rewards, so pain, you may lose money or lose work or whatever the issues are, then um, I think you'd make more rounded decisions, and maybe potentially you may end up making decisions that are thinking longer term instead of just shorter term.
Yeah. What you just said, they have that as one of the principles. So I'm going to highlight that. So I'm trying to get, why I'm asking this question is because I'm always inundated with all this stuff. And I'm trying to get back to, what does it look like? If anybody on the, Jeff, I think you are in a cooperative. Bill, you're kind of new. Jose, anybody want to jump in when you're seeing this? um, I'm kind of trying to get a fresh view of what you think about cooperatives as far as idealistic versus pragmatic.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, anything that isn't, the current relationship between employer and employee to me is exploitative and unjust. It's dehumanizing. You take away people's humanity when they can't be part of the decisions that affect their lives. So it's fundamentally wrong, just like slavery was wrong. So is wage slavery or whatever. I mean, basically when you go to a workplace and the emperor, who's the owner, demands you to do things, that's not the kind of world I want to live in. So I think we ought to be moving toward a situation where anybody who works has some say so in what's done with their labor.
100%. I mean, me and you are on the same page. You're kind of in the same boat as me as far as like we're inundated in this stuff, uh Bill, Jose, if you feel like chiming in, like, I've been completely face down looking at this stuff for years. So I'm trying to get what other people, like, a fresh view, because reason why is this book kind of when I'm reading it, it kind of is like the real, oh, Josh, it kind of is saying, oh, the fantasy is real. This book is taking the position that this is true. Better decisions will result. And they start giving arguments why in their experience. And so I'm trying to get it. I'm trying to figure out, is that kind of what you all think when you think of cooperatives? Do you think, oh yeah, a bunch of people get together, better decisions will result? Is that a thing that is intuitive to you? Is that the thing that jumps out to you? Or do you think chaos is going to result if there isn't top-down control, something like that?
So the first thing first of all, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, real quick. So the first thing that I noticed was the dichotomy between, is this idealistic, is this pragmatic? And so the first thing that, my hunch feeling or my reaction, knee-jerk reaction was, well, that's the framing that the current hegemon of how people think about this. This is how they would frame the conversation with talking about co-ops, as if, and to me, it's like, well, it depends on the topic. It's like, I don't wish to add this tag that co-ops are either more idealistic or more pragmatic, right? So to me, that's buying the current, which to me, it's false, right? So to me, it's a matter of what you were talking about like, why not? Why not have that power? To me, it's about power. Why can't we have more power over decisions that affect our lives? And to me, no answer it's really satisfactory, right? So to me, it's like, why can't I have more control? And to have control, why can't I have ownership of what I produce? So to me, it's just that. It's almost like a natural thing. It's like, you would have to tell me why not.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's where I stand.
Oh man, it's a refreshing. Yeah, I'm telling you, these views are helping me because I'm just so far down in the weeds. I feel like I feel like I'm kind of lost. Like, I've been looking at this stuff for so long. I want to get fresh perspectives. Like, what is it that you all think? Sometimes I can't even tell what's intuitive anymore. Because to me, a lot of stuff is, oh, this is obvious, this is not. And I'm gearing myself to think about, for me, I'm thinking about economists or people who are kind of more libertarian bent. The people are kind of, oh, none of this stuff will ever work. And I'm trying to direct myself towards them. And then when I was reading this book, I started being like, oh, they actually are taking the idealistic view and saying, oh yeah, no, it works. From the beginning, like straight through. Okay, I forgot that people, when they first look at this, I think I remember everybody looks at it this way. And I'm like, this might be the book to recommend to people.
Yeah, I hear on that. I hear on that. And the fact of the matter is that even scholars that really like the economists of the last 30, 40 years, right? They've been like dogmatic completely about liberal economics and moreover, neoliberalism. So we're contending with a sort of, in a way, dystopian dogma, right? It's like in which they don't even understand, or they don't have any incentive to deviate from that, because there are also consequences, right? There's a reason why dissenters are kind of weeded out from some of these institutions, right? Because that's the way it is. That's like the head of departments. That's all they're going to talk about, and don't ever dare question. So we're contending with that type of bias. So I hear you. Of course, to me, it's almost like, why is this like the tacit, the default conversation, and we're not even daring to question anything. So yeah.
100%. The narrative, dare I say, the ideology, the way things are framed. And I know it's hard for people to try to deviate from that. And then I'm trying to gear myself against that and best arguments against that, to the point where, oh, I forget what's intuitive anymore.
Yeah.
To the person who's just jumping in, I don't know, Bill, you may want to jump in or not. It's cool if you don't want to. I am going to jump over here. Cornerstones. Let's see. Yeah, so my main point over here is this: when I saw this, better decisions will result. I'm kind of, this person's had a cooperative for, what is it, 30 years or something like that. Not 30, 40 years, 50 years, long time. And then they're still saying idealistic things. Wait a minute. Okay. Let's see what they have to say. And then, so I'm going to go ahead and say this first chapter, I was like, yeah, you know, it seemed very much kind of idealistic is a good word. And I thought that I was going to get kind of not a lot of meat. And then I got hit really hard in the second chapter where, oh no, this guy, of course, he's been doing this longer than me. He started having lots of, like, he's reading research studies and he has all this other stuff. I'm like, oh, I felt like I got humbled. So I'm like, okay, I like this book. Now all of a sudden, so I normally don't get that kind of experience when I'm reading. So I don't know if any of you will get that from just kind of going through this. That's what I was feeling when I was reading the book. That's the experience that I was having. So that's why I'm sharing that. So, like, this is what the first chapter is like. So he's talking about the company, co-founded in 1975. I was born in 1975. I'm like, okay, these guys, a bit older. So on the island of Martha's Vineyard, the way the connotates, I'm from Massachusetts, so the connotates of Martha's Vineyard is like, that's where rich people are, So I'm like, oh, what's this all about? Right. South Mountain. It's basically they build houses. They started out, very kind of humble. And this person kind of, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's kind of more hippie-ish. They're like, oh, it's about craftsmanship and stuff that that I like. And I, for me personally, but normally people think, oh, that's gonna fail. Or if it doesn't fail, it was lucky. And I'm kind of, in my view, when I'm reading this, I'm kind of like, how would an economist view this? And they're going to look at it as like, oh yeah, this is kind of a lifestyle business that became lucky and ended up succeeding. And I'm kind of, that's, what I'm thinking of, like how they're going to critique it. And so I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, yeah. So they're saying some of the things like, I kind of enjoyed this. Basically, one of the business lessons that they got from the client is like, hey, you should make a profit. So this is kind of the idea of someone saying, you're being too humble. You need to make more money, or you don't know how to make money. That's the first, in this first chapter, it's one of the themes. We're buying from you, but we're going to show you how to make money. Now this, like, if you've been in business, your customers don't know. They don't really do this with you. They don't come to you and say, oh, we're going to show you how to make money, right? This person literally went through their books and said, no, this is a fair profit for you, right? So this is kind of an experience that no one ever really, it's kind of more like a fantasy kind of thing. And so when I'm reading this, that's how I'm like, oh, wow. We never had no customer come to us saying, oh, you're not billing enough, right? And let me show you what a proper, fair way to make. that kind of thing. So I'm reading this and I'm getting, okay, this seems like one of those things where in my mind, I start saying this is kind of a winner's bias type memoir of a survivor through, like, for this type of memoir, there's 1,000 failures that did the same thing. That's what's popping out to me. And then this part when they're talking about competition, so they make houses, and the nightmare, I don't make houses or anything, but I do know that there's like a lot of politics about zoning. And oh, we went somewhere and we couldn't get the zoning license for doing this type of building, and we have to pay the right person. This kind of a corruption is involved. So here's an experience. They moved somewhere and they were trying to build a house. Move right into, and people told them, move right into town from outside. You're going to build a house? No way. You got to be Herbert Hancock to do that. He runs the town. He's the main builder. He's the only one that gets a permit. And literally, this is a person that's the assessor, member of the Board of Health, and a building and zoning inspector. And whatever went through the town hall went through him, right? So this person like approves the permits, right? And then they said, well, you know what we learned is question rather than declare, understand the view from the other side of the table and search out commonalities, and collaboration is more likely than conflict. So the nightmare scenario, if you're a builder, is the person that builds houses in that place also awards the permits. And then they said, yeah, you know what? If you just question rather than declare and understand the view from the other side, or whether and search out commonalities, they're going to collaborate with you. Like this kind of stuff, when I'm reading a book like this, I'm like, okay, this is a winner's bias type book. I'm giving you my experience of how I was thinking about the book, right? And I'm like, okay, fine, I'm going to go through this thing, right? And I mean, that's like the ultimate kind of, I would say, hippiest view of how to solve conflict is this. I don't know if I can come up with a better example of, if you're just nice, the person that you're competing with, they'll just also, just out of kindness or heart, go ahead and give you the permit. They'll allow you to compete with them. That kind of thing.
I was waiting for you to tell me that they lost the work and had to do some special way. So yeah, this definitely feels like a good story, just a happy story.
Yeah, a happy story. Oh, maybe I'll put it like that. Hey, when I was reading this, like, this is gonna be, I'm gonna force myself through this book situation when I read this, right? And I'm like, okay. In my mind, I'm like, winner's bias is how I look at it, right? And so this is the meat of the book here. Our attempt to remake the way we do business pivots on 8 essential cornerstones. Okay. Sharing ownership, cultivating workplace democracy, challenging the gospel of growth, balancing multiple bottom lines, celebrating the spirit of craft, practicing community entrepreneurialism, entrepreneurialism, and thinking like cathedral builders and committing to the business of place. I actually like these 8 principles. So let's go through them. Sharing ownership. Ownership has become available to all employees. This is after, this is like what they did after they went through all of their researching in the best way. Ownership has become available to all employees, enabling people to own and guide their workplace. The responsibility, the power, and the profits all belong to the group of owners. Again, these principles evolved over, they would start in 1975. It evolved over maybe 10, 20 years. Okay. They got a nice quote from Thomas Paine. So I need to dig into this a little bit more. his vision was every man a proprietor. It's a worthy ideal to own one's place of work. But in the corporate era, most citizens are necessarily employees and always will be. We need a new economic vision for a new era, not every man a proprietor, but every employee and owner. I really like this. So I think this is a good thing. There's a lot in this book that I think are things when you're dealing with cooperatives, I think are good takeaway. Well, excellent takeaways. So cultivating workplace democracy. Just this way of phrasing this. So there's demand, there's kind of how do you like propagandize workplace democracy, enforce workplace democracy, uh, train people to have work, but these cultivating workplace democracy. Like, how do you? There's a problem there that just in the phrase they tried to solve. So every employee as an owner is our intention. This alone, they have an intention and where they want to go. It isn't. It's start. This is stuff that is not. When I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, this isn't idealistic. This is using language that, okay, they were dealing with real world stuff, but they abstracted from it and started making these principles. And I can kind of tell that this comes from experience. So I'm like, oh, there's something here. Every employee as an owner is our intention. So a lot of people don't want to be an owner when they see the headaches. So they have intention. Okay. More than half our employees are full owners. Each time another joins, each time a new management approach allows more voices to be heard. And each time we distribute more responsibility, we move steadily towards the goals of democracy, fairness, and transparency. Excellent. Excellent way of putting that. Okay, what's next? Challenging the gospel of growth. Okay, these are like the economists are cringing. Okay, we look for ways to develop and thrive through enlarging, thereby holding to limited growth. Okay, what's this limited growth thing? When we grow, it is by intention rather than by response to demand. I think that's a great sentence. We think about enough rather than more, enough profits to retain and share, enough compensation for all, enough health and well-being, enough time to give our work the attention it deserves, enough communication, enough to manage, enough troubles, enough headaches. This would be a way to kind of have what I'm think in the back of your mind when you're thinking about the decisions between let's get as many people as possible versus not kind of thing. Like you have this feast and famine with humans, like hire lots of people. Uh-oh, no money. Get rid of lots of people. I'm like, no, we're not doing that because we care about people. All right. Balancing multiple bottom lines. We propose cooperation rather than competition as an avenue business success. Metaphorically speaking, these are all bottom lines, even though they cannot necessarily or easily be quantified or measured. This part is the part that is like, oh, how do you manage this? But talking about good living for instead of just bottom line, if you're not familiar with like profit loss statements and balance, but really it's the balance sheet. The bottom line is where you see the profit, right? So thinking of instead of just profit, we're thinking about good living for our families, meeting expectations of the clients, so on and so forth. They're just having this concept of there's multiple bottom lines, it's not just profit. And having that way to mess with the narrative or inject that into the discussions. Celebrating the spirit of craft. This, speaks to my heart. So when we work as craftspeople, pleasure can soar above the tedium, right? That at least some of the time characterizes all work. Craftsmanship is, for many of our employees and employee owners, the aspect of our work that evokes the most passion. This is basically kind of getting this ethos or why it is that we're doing kind of more of this purpose as part of a cooperative. And so I think that they express it very nicely. They have it as a principle, practicing community entrepreneurialism. So essentially they build houses and they found a way, using their web of relationships to go ahead and try to create not just homes for the rich or homes. This is Martha's Vineyard. So it's like, if you don't know Martha's Vineyard, like Obama has a house there, right? So it's rich, right? So trying to make it to where in that area, oh no, we're also going to have some kind of affordable housing, if it's even possible, kind of thing. So they have that on the radar to do, and that's what they try to solve community problems, encourage a better future for the place we live in. This is also speaks. We did a book review on the medieval guilds and how it's very similar to the principles behind cooperatives and stuff, and employee ownership and all that, craftsmanship and these types of things. Main thing is essentially having the idea that you're going to work on something that you might not be able to see the end of it. You might not live to see it flourish. Having that mindset, that's what a cathedral builder is like. So people who started cathedrals, those who designed them, and those who first worked on them knew for certain that they would never see them finished. They knew that they were creating something glorious, which would stand for centuries, long after their own names had been forgotten. That's how thinking like a cathedral builder is different than thinking of like a quarterly type, profits for the quarter. So this is aligned with, this one could be very much aligned with the spirit of the craft. That's how someone that is involved with their work is going to be thinking about their work. And this is an argument, again, this is lined up against this gospel of growth. Gospel of growth is going to go well hand in hand with this quarterly way of thinking. They essentially say an argument against that is that this long-term thinking, a driver would be this cathedral way of thinking. And you can have a long-term mindset advantage versus what, again, like what an economist would say or venture capitalists say, you all are in a lifestyle business. You're just doing something just to support yourself for a little while. It's going to disappear. It's not really advantageous. Now they have examples of top tier cooperatives in here that I wasn't familiar with that are going to be, they think this way and they're still top tier. It's excellent. So committing to the business of place, this is kind of the local long-term investment where you are. Very unique to me. Again, there is normally when you think of supporting local, you think of supporting local where it's kind of maybe lower socioeconomic probably, or something like that. They were supporting local and it was higher socioeconomic, but then they were supporting some type of diversity and lower socioeconomic housing, and then also like environmental things in the higher area. So instead of that alone, you could just think about just that. We could just talk about that for an hour. Oh, that's a kind of not a normally what people would think. Normally you would think, let's go over to lower socioeconomic or something like that, and that's where we're going to be able to do the best things. What about having your message in the higher socioeconomic and then saying this is the best way to enable some diversity there, and having a message over there? So they were doing that. Any questions so far? Got 20 minutes.
Can you go back to the enough area, enough.
It's that gospel growth.
Challenging the gospel. Yeah. So yeah, I was thinking about, well, this says, let's see, enough profits to retain share and compensation for all, enough for compensation for all. So there's something in here that's, for me, it seems like it's saying that you're not focused on just one thing, like we are trying to make all the profit or whatever. Okay, so where this ends up bringing to my mind is how you say competitive with the market, when people could go potentially and make more somewhere else. I guess you could say you need to make enough to keep them around, but it seems like there's some balance between that and you are trying to compete. Are you going to be making more than what you would be outside? But anyways, it was raising some questions for me, but is there other things here that you're saying that goes into that?
They were saying, they were taking the perspective of, you can take the weaknesses that you're talking about and make them into strengths. So, yes, paraphrasing, whatever, there's going to be the brain drain problem of, oh, I can make more money somewhere else, whatever. But we're going to get into the next chapter, but basically one thing to say, well, one incentive is they have a 5-year rule, and the 5-year rule, you kind of really vet someone, and then they're an owner and they actually have to buy in, but they're definitely retiring from the incentive. You're going to have the opposite problem of like what you would think you would have, as far as like the people that are going to stay through, they're definitely going to be on the top end. You're going to have the problem of motivating the people on the bottom end. Right. So they have a kind of a system in here to try to do that. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing you were talking about, but yeah.
So what you just said, it to me is like, well, it seems like you're talking about a partnership, like a regular just partnership in which you buy in, yada yada. You're definitely expected, or how it would make sense for that investment to pan out is for you to stay longer. So I wonder, how is that necessarily, ascribed to the co-op model? And another thing that you said was about like and again, I'm not seeing the slides, I'm on audio only, but what you were saying about like profit and growth, I don't know if this was like the intent of the author, or if I'm getting this right. But to me, it's almost like the profit, the fact that let's say that you are for profit and that's all you care about. That to me is not even like negating the model of co-op. That you could have a co-op. Everybody say, hey, are we all on board? Let's just grow. And perhaps what's more related to that growth is that right now, the growth comes at the cost of the working conditions of people, right? Yeah. But in and of itself, it's like, hey, you know what? If we grow, actually, we could have a little bit more of an economy of scale. We could actually we just, hire more people, and maybe we can all work less, and we'll get more profit. Isn't that a good deal? Yeah, we're all on board. Let's go. Right. So in my mind, I just reacted a little bit because I know that for co-ops, there's always this, again, with the hegemon, it's like, oh, well, people that just want to live, kind of scrap by, or they're like good enough, they don't want to grow. And I'm like, that's not necessarily a co-op. You can have like a bunch of other corporations that actually follow that model, right? It's not inherent to this. Someone's like, oh, you just want to live poor and stuff. That's all part of the propaganda, right? So anyway, it's just a quick comment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like when he's saying enough, that does sound like he's saying, yeah, we're all going to be broke kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
It does sound like that. And then he has this balancing multiple bottom lines Right. That's the next
So
principle.
why does enough sound like broke? I don't understand that. Enough is enough. It just
Like
means
barely enough.
I'm not taking it as broke, Jeff, but it does feel like this middle area where we go, we're not trying to get anyone where they're rich or, whatever that would mean. Like, we're not, if you're trying to go for $1 million a year and you could get by on 100,000, we'll get you to 200, but if you're $1 million, you're in the wrong place. But I don't take it as we're going to get you just a little over minimum wage. But I don't know that there's actually like a limit there, or if he's intending something else when he's saying enough. It's just
no,
kind of.
I think he just means not too much. Like, so Nova Web Development, one of our 3 principles of unity is we want to make a living, not a killing. And that's the thing, right? I mean,
why not make a killing, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's embedded in that is that we don't want to make a killing at the cost of other things, right? Because if you could, like, why wouldn't you, right? But I think
right.
it's implicit that, because you're going to have to stretch yourself and make all these sacrifices, right? And then it makes sense. But otherwise, wait, why would I? Hey, if we grow, right? All the better.
That killing part, what Jeff is saying, is kind of exemplified in their committing to business of place and practicing community entrepreneurialism. So you basically, if you make a killing, you're hurting your community in some way.
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
I'm with you. You're hurting other people. When you have more than you need, and then others starve.
Right. And so it seems like that's the built-in balance of these 8 principles that they learned over 20 years or so. And then that's so yeah, this enough thing connotes.
To me, that doesn't mean that you don't. Let's say that enough is your company and your community and your co-op is 10 million, but you've business opportunity to make 50 million if you go in some other, maybe it's another city or something else, and the only thing in that place is corporations that don't care and they're exploiting the community, and you take money away from them. To me, it wouldn't be that, is that too much? But then it would be like, how do you help that other community if you're going to take money away from the corporations that are doing it? So and then it would become enough, not because it's more than enough for the community that you were in before, but now you're growing a larger community.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's many ways to make a killing, which I think in a way that slogan is like so intimately related to the current model, right? That I would also say, making a killing, what do you mean? What do you mean is making a killing at the cost of a lot of things. One of them being the workers are actually getting part of that, right? Or the community or sustainability practices, right? Now, if I'm thinking about, if let's say that you grow the business, and of course you are in a marketplace, and you are, let's say, penetrating this market, and others, of course, that's okay. You're winning. If you're winning against a model that is less sustainable, that is exploitative, then I would think, great, all the more. In fact, right? As long as the how is, again, sustainable, and you're actually, again, giving back to the community, and even that, not even necessarily giving back, but actually how you do it is actually like good, and doesn't negatively impact, right? It's like the current model is, you just do whatever you want, and then you do some charity to kind of make up for a little bit of the destruction, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
Abundance, is that a word that has a negative connotation for y'all? Abundance versus I get the connotations and make a killing, but it seems like saying enough. I think there's something there that they're trying to get to.
They have a whole chapter on this, and I don't get to it. This challenge, the gospel of growth. There's a whole chapter.
Right. So
Right.
the gospel of growth for me is like abundance and prosperity, which doesn't imply, in my mind, doesn't mean a killing as in someone else is going to be exploited. Ideally, it's just, the sustainability that you were saying, that should be part of it. I don't think you can have true abundance and prosperity if it's not sustainable. And
So
really
yeah,
sustainable, you need
go
the
ahead.
whole community should have abundance.
Yeah, we could all partake on that abundance, right?
Yeah. So this, the way that they laid out these principles and then their chapters, and then how you can kind of see that there's a paradox in every principle. Pretty much that you're getting immediately. It's like, well, how do they handle this? How do they handle this? That is the sign of when an author, or really people that even are making art, whether film or anything, when they force you to confront a paradox, that's the sign of good art. That's the sign of good. So for me, like, you all are picking up on stuff faster than I did. Because even when I was reading through these principles, I was like, let's see, but you all are like, wait a minute, what about this? Wait a minute about this. So, and then this first one, and now we only really have 10 minutes or 15 minutes to go through it. This first one, sharing ownership, they really start doing a deep dive. So let's jump over there. Sharing ownership. Okay, let's go in here, and I'm going to try to go through some of my highlights. It's quick. Just right off the bat, throw out something controversial. With few exceptions, right? It's talking about the capitalistic system. With few exceptions, the system works like this: capital hires labor, and capital claims ownership of the final product. Can one imagine an economy where labor hires capital, where workers have a legal right to the profits and legal responsibility for the liabilities because they are owners, where workers jointly manage the firm and themselves in a democratic fashion? So automatically he's using a different vocabulary and all this stuff. As soon as he got in the second chapter, and like blasted, and you're like, oh, okay, this is like reading two different books. If you haven't looked at the first chapter, it was very much love and everything, that kind of thing. And get this chapter is like, oh, okay, all right, So now he says our structure should guarantee that anyone who makes a career here be extended the privileges, responsibilities, rewards, and headaches of ownership. Like, oh, this person has gone through some growing pains and they know what they're talking about. All right. Okay. All right. To say it another way, what if the thing we've built with painstaking care and love evolves into something we no longer like? It's a serious risk. So he's talking about here, what if you allow everyone to make decisions and then they mess it up against what your vision was? Oh, they're going to risk it. What if they run it into the ground? Kind of thing. What are you going to do? This is the kind of thing of, if you're used to a hierarchy and you build something up, because remember, they built it up as a hierarchy and then they changed it to a cooperative, right? So this is the story of that. And then they were coming up with all these schemes and all that stuff. And it was like, well, why don't you just retain control and then basically piecemeal it over? And then he said, okay, no. The idea was to spread the control widely so that the voices of all owners had meaning. You can't steal second. I love this saying. You can't steal second without taking your foot off first. Right? So baseball analogy. And we came to agree that the only protection needed was veto power over issues directly related to property, probably because he had liability over, with the property and stuff like that. And so basically that was it. So essentially they set up a system where he is selling the property to the owners over the course of the 5 year, and they're basically working to get the ownership, right? And then it's bought. The people who are there within the cooperative, they did this conversion. So kind of we can go into all types of different ways of talking about this owner financing or whatever. So okay, let's go to infinite variations on the. There are infinite variations on the theme of employee ownership. I think the phrase employee ownership is a really good phrase to use when talking about these problems. There's one universal requirement. First, the owners and then the employees have to see the value and want to pursue it. That's the value of employee ownership, right? That's what they're talking about. If the desire is not present, there's no point in commencing the difficult and complicated journey that it surely will be, and that surely will be to become employee owned. And then there's no basis for identifying and developing the unique set of principles and doctrine that's going to be right for this owner and these employees. Again, making employee ownership isn't just a blanket, which, coming like in a, like in a theoretical viewpoint, employees should definitely have the right to view the fruits of their labor. And so employee ownership, employer employee ownership contract is invalid or illegitimate. Let's go ahead and destroy that and let it rip, right? Well, he's saying pragmatically, people need to actually care in order for it to work. So you want to have them identifying, in order to make it work, they need to be able to identify unique set of principles and doctrine that's going to be right for that specific employer and that set of employees, which those 8 principles, that was theirs. So he's not even saying those 8 principles would be yours, right? And so they followed Mondragon. That was a thing. If you're not familiar with Mondragon, let's talk about it later. The 5-year thing. Particularly important was the institution of a lengthy 5-year trial period before ownership. You don't really hear so much about from a mature cooperative that went through pain. How do they onboard? And what length of time really will you get this buy-in? And they went in and said it's 5 year. And then they also have this buy-in fee. I think, Jose, you were talking about this. So we established an ownership buy-in fee, and we decided that this needed to be significant. They decided it should be significant but affordable. We set it at the price of a good used car, an expense everyone seems to be able to manage when necessary. And then after a while, they found out the 5-year waiting period turned out to be none too long. So we were talking about this. I find this to be quite interesting. Jose, I think you had something to say about it. And whoever wants to comment, go ahead and, does anybody have a comment about this?
Like, in my mind, I always like, because I've been confronted with this, and trying to figure out, okay, what makes sense, what's fair, right? What can I support, right, with logic, as opposed to going into the moral part, which you can get lost there. So in my mind, it's like those requirements of, 5 years, or and I feel, that it's always my greedy self that is, no. Why should they get access to that? Something that I built. And every time there's like one of those like whispers in my mind, it's like, no, wait a second. I didn't build this. It's like we did, right? So I get like, I start shooting down all those little whispers of the devil in my mind. And then one of the things is like, why do people need to wait that long? And then some of it is like, well, a second, let's say that you hire somebody today. You're telling me that they're going to be owner right away. What about all of the stuff that other people built? I'm like, well, did those people get rewarded, and did they have the power to rule over that? If so, then they were already compensated. So what does it matter if someone comes in and because they are already putting in the work, they are already have a right to participate, right? So in my mind, that's what it is. One of the things that also in my mind is like the investment. The initial capital investment. And I do think that, and this is part of how partnerships nowadays do it, right? It's like, well, we invested all this money, right? And so we deserve to get the money back of the initial investment. So that's pretty much one of the few, and I'm open to hearing more about this. One of the reasons that are like logical is, okay, well, if somebody comes in, it's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe you have a right to some of the proceeds, but we also need to be paying these people, right? That put capital before you. But once that reaches, okay, you got paid back. Okay, it's time. Now we're all on the same page, right? It's like, now this is everybody's. Anyway, just trying to figure out in my mind, I don't want to ramble. It's like, what are the implicit biases in each of these requirements per se? And a lot of it is really not logical if you just scrap the surface.
Yeah, I think gotta get it. You got to get to the point to where the rubber meets the road. How much did the people who were in the beginning risk and inject? And so kind of coming up with outside of that context, and when I say inject, as far as sweat equity and or cash, right? Outside of that context, then it's kind of hard. But they talk about that. They talk about that soon, right? And then
to a certain extent, it's the mythological founder. There's a lot of that permeates in the business circles around, like, oh my God, the risk. No. Mm-hmm. I am entitled to keep exploiting at infinitum, even my children, because this one day I decided that I was put down $15,000, and that risk, that's it. I have the right to do that. And it's just like mythological. It's like, does that even make sense? It doesn't matter, because the founder, the almighty founder, right? Anyway.
Yeah. There's two things that I'm going to jump into. So you can kind of box that risk and make an attempt in here. So you see in the principles, you got community and you have other things. It would be better for an entity to be employee owned for the community. So there's kind of a box there. As far as like what your risk is, there's kind of an upper bound, is what I'm trying to say. But there's that side. But in another book, David Ellerman's book, he used the example of George Washington, United States. Essentially, the person who takes this risk, right, a revolutionary, and says, "Oh, I'm going to go to this fighting, I'm going to do all that." He could have became a king here and said, now I'm not worshiping this dude or anything, right? But he could have became a king and said, nope, I'm not going to be king. We're going to do this democracy thing. And we now don't say that it would be legitimate for him to have been a king, even though he could have and took all the risks. So we're talking about risk of $15,000, even $100 million, whatever it is. Your life, what is that compared to your life and the life of all of your buddies that you got together to say, nope, we're going to fight this other group and all of us could die? And that kind of mentality of, no, that's risk. Like me and everyone I know, all my friends, all the people that and we could all die. And you know what? No, it's not legitimate for us to take ownership. Like he uses that as an example, David Ellerman. I think he addresses this risk thing. There is a bound to risk that we all, even the most libertarian, have tacitly accept. Where it's like, yeah, there's a bound. Like we don't allow, like you went, fought, killed a bunch of people, controlled this land and all that. No, we don't believe in kings. Doesn't matter. Like you still need to be democratic at some point. That's a other argument that really bounds it. In my mind, I go backwards from there. And so, the book essentially, let's, like, to Jose, like what you're saying, here's something for the context. It seems like what they're implying in this book, you're retiring in your mid-50s if you become a partner in this thing. Like if you become an owner. So with that, oh, you're buying in for a car? No, you buy a car on your own and it's a liability. This thing you're buying and it's the equivalent of a car, and you're buying into retiring in your 50s. At least they're using examples of a lot of people retiring in their 50s. So even if it was in the 60s, you know, it's like whatever, right? So that's really a boundary of, oh, that's the argument of why the whole thing of this injection forces, incentivizes people to have the buy-in, and it ends up making it work. Anyone else on this? I think that this was a big takeaway, actually, this 5-year waiting period, and we're coming on to an hour here. So I knew this was going to be a bit longer. So that's why I wanted to, I feel like this engagement was a lot better than normal. Anyone else? Okay, I think I want to try to end it there. And I think this might be a 3, we might go through 3 sessions with this book, actually. So because I think that has a lot to say, and it's kind of going back to some of the basic arguments and thoughts that we normally have about this, which I think is good.
Watson, if I may.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, this is just personally, right? You know, I don't mind taking like more sessions to go over some materials if we are actually having this fruitful. To me, like today, I thought like today was different. I've been on the call a few times before. To me, this is way more valuable because we're challenging the text, and we're right. So to me, that back and forth is also very important.
Yeah,
and valuable.
Yeah, I agree. That's why, I mean, this book forced me, because I'm like, oh, I'm kind of lost. You know, I'm looking at this thing and I kind of got challenged myself by the book. I'm like, wait a minute, let me get the opinions of you all. And it seems like it'd be a better interaction.